The cast of Pawn Stars has seen it all, but once in a while, something enters the gold and silver pawn shop that manages to surprise them. From terrifying taxidermy to genuine elephant manure, these are the strangest, oddest, and most bizarre moments captured on Pawn Stars. It takes two people to carry this giant gold-painted foam Richard Nixon head into the gold and silver pawn shop. When it's plunked down in front of Rick, he just laughs. What in the world would anyone do with such a thing? To answer that, the owner puts it on, turning himself into a human bobblehead. Definitely funny, but Rick still isn't convinced it's worth buying. And he just lets out a hearty laugh when the guy says he's hoping to get $2,500 for it.
No one's gonna buy a head.
Indeed, Nixon has been a running joke since resigning from the U.S. presidency in 1974 amid the Watergate scandal. But the item's owner explains that since he's owned it, plenty of people have taken photos with the foam head while making Nixon's famous V for Victory sign with their hands. It could be great for the pawn shop window, he argues, but Rick isn't sold, and neither is the foam head. A guy walks into a pawn shop carrying two life-size dummies dressed in Western wear. No, this isn't the beginning of a bad joke. It's something that really happened on Pawn Stars. While Chumlee is obviously bewildered, the old man is rather intrigued by the enormous, borderline creepy dolls.
I want these dummies, and I think they'll look good in the shop.
These particular dummies are hand-painted with movable joints and various heads to choose from. They're just lifelike enough that the owner has set them in his car to keep people from breaking in. While the owner paid $1,000 each, the old man firmly offers him $500 for the pair, which is accepted. They're quickly hauled off to the back of the shop and posed. When Rick gets a look at them, he immediately assumes Chumlee made this stupid purchase. When the old man admits that he bought them, Rick is stunned, and he's even more surprised that his father has named the dummies.
Did you name them?
Yes, I did, Ed and George.
After Rick and the old man buy an old-school winemaking machine, Chumlee decides he wants to make his own $2 Chum brand wine. So he fills a trash bag up with some grapes and starts stomping. Things become more complicated, however, when he attempts to transfer the pulverized grapes into a giant wine jug. Much of the chunky concoction ends up on the floor, so Chumlee adds some store-bought wine to make it look better. He sets it aside for 3 months so that it can ferment. When the time comes, he lugs the jug into the back room to present the other guys with his homemade Pawn Stars Pinot. It doesn't look great, but Rick feels obligated to try it because Chumlee tried so hard. After clinking glasses, the verdict is split. Rick and Big Hoss think it's disgusting, while Chum and the old man think it's not so bad.
It's not bad, I kind of like it.
It's weird enough when Public Enemy's Flavor Flav walks through the Pawn Stars door, but what he's looking to sell is even more bizarre. A bronze statue of O.J. Simpson he thinks is worth $125,000. While Simpson was acquitted of murdering his ex-wife and her friend in a highly publicized jury trial in the mid-90s, he lost a civil lawsuit which awarded the victims' families millions of dollars. To get the money, Simpson's estate was liquidated and many of his possessions were auctioned off, including the statue that used to sit poolside at his Los Angeles home. Flav acquired it from a radio DJ and took it on tour. Unfortunately, business isn't good for Flav. Chum can only offer him $80,000 for the statue, while the rapper thinks the statue is actually worth way more than $125,000. Chum politely disagrees, and Flav ends up leaving with the statue, unsold. We all scream for ice cream, right? Rick certainly does when a homemade ice cream maker who uses a John Deere motor comes through the pawn shop. He ends up paying $2,000 for it. Later, Rick catches Chumlee messing with the machine. When Chum says he wants to make everyone ice cream, Rick thinks that's a really nice gesture and hands him some money so he can make enough for everyone. What could possibly go wrong? Cut to the old man enjoying an ice cream cone. Rick is impressed Chum actually made the tasty treat with the contraption he bought, and the old man admits it's good for $2. Yep, Chum is charging for his homemade ice cream. He even set up a table outside the pawn shop to make a little money. Rick is furious and storms outside to see a line forming. It looks like he's going to shut the whole thing down until the shop's own security guard begs him not to.
Please don't shut it down. I've been in line for 20 minutes. There's kids back there, bro.
So Rick declares that everyone waiting gets free ice cream. Now that's a sweet ending. This bizarre Pawn Stars moment isn't so much about an item, but about its seller, a man who gets his asking price, then turns his back on it. The owner comes in asking $50,000 for a Gibson guitar, but not just any Gibson. This one is the first ever Master Museum SJ200. When he carefully takes it out of the case, he calls it a perfect art piece that's the best sounding guitar you'll ever play. When an expert is called in to check it out, he says it's the Rolex Presidential of guitars that usually only winds up in a rock star's hands. It's definitely worth the asking price. Big Hoss tries to haggle with the guy, but he won't budge from his $50,000 demand. However, the Pawn Stars pro eventually wears him down to $48,000. After a hesitant handshake, the guy goes to pick up his money but says he's having second thoughts. Trying to keep him in the game, Hoss lays out $48,000 in $100 bills in front of him. When the guy still drags his feet, Hoss offers him another $2,000, taking him up to his original asking price. But the seller just can't do it, and in the end, he walks out with the guitar, leaving a disappointed Hoss and a giant pile of cash behind. Everyone of a certain age remembers where they were when football legend turned accused murderer O.J. Simpson led police on a low-speed car chase down a Los Angeles freeway in 1994. So, when the white Ford Bronco that he was a passenger in during that chase pulls into the pawn shop parking lot, Rick is intrigued and jumps at the chance to give it a test ride. Although Simpson never owned the Bronco, it's definitely the one that everyone watched him try to evade police in. The seller, who was Simpson's agent at the time, acquired it from the previous owner, saving it from being sold to a tour company that wanted to drive it up and down the freeway and past the murder site. When the seller asks for $1.3 million, Rick says he can't assess whether that's a fair price because it's such an unusual, one-of-a-kind item. While Rick thinks someone may pay that price at auction, he passes because it's too much of a gamble. When Chumlee gets what he thinks is a prank call from someone claiming to work on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, he's about to hang up when Rick steps in. Turns out it's actually the game show, and they want the Pawn Stars guys on it for a charity event. Big Hoss is immediately worried about Chum answering any questions, and the old man quickly offers a helpful warning.
If you let him answer questions, you won't make it past the first round.
To prove them wrong, Chumlee starts studying. After having his nose in a book for a few days, soaking up information, Chum gets bombarded with test questions from the guys, and he somehow answers them all correctly. Later in the episode, Chumlee appears on the game show, where he's asked a $1 million question about naming the ghosts in the Ms. Pac-Man video game, and he gets it right. He just won $1 million. But then we find out it was all just a dream. He had fallen asleep at work. In reality, the Pawn Stars gang did really appear on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, walking away with $10,000 after incorrectly answering their sixth question. Their winnings went to the Boys and Girls Club of Las Vegas. Here's a deal that really stinks. A seller comes into the pawn shop while trying to sell a can of Zoodoo. What is Zoodoo?
Guaranteed genuine rotted elephant manure.
Yes, he's literally trying to sell a load of crap. This product was sold by the Washington Park Zoo in Portland, Oregon to raise money to protect endangered species. The owner thinks this novelty item is priceless because it's so rare, but he's willing to part with it for $10,000. The old man thinks it's a ridiculous thing to buy, but Chumlee thinks the old school packaging and jokey novelty factor is cool. So leave it to Chum to shell out $20 of his own money for crap in a can. These days, having your tonsils removed is pretty routine and safe, but in the 1800s it was still a rather crude procedure, hence the very scary-looking tonsil remover that ended up on Pawn Stars, brought in by a doctor who was way too excited to explain how it worked. Called a tonsilotome, the tool is basically a small guillotine that goes down the throat and snips off the tonsils. But the owner doesn't just stop there, and the more she explains, the more squeamish Big Hoss gets. Still, his discomfort won't stop him from buying something so valuable. She asks for $1,100, and after some back and forth, they agree on $800. Now, off with their tonsils. One year, Chumlee comes into work dressed as Santa, eager to organize a secret Santa swap, where you have to give a gift to the person you pulled out of the hat. Chum insists on a strict rule of secrecy when it comes to who each person got in the gift swap.
Don't tell them who you got. It's a secret.
But of course, Big Hoss asks Rick and the old man who they got, and it turns out they all got Chumlee. They immediately know what Chum has done and come up with their own plan to buy each other gifts. When the holiday party rolls around and the Secret Santa gets underway, Chumlee is surprised when the first gift he picks up is for Rick. Chum's even more surprised when the second gift he picks up is for Corey. That's when the old man explains that they figured out Chum's little game of trying to get the most gifts. His punishment is that he's left without a present, but he does get a pat on the back and a Christmas bonus from Rick for throwing a good party. Technically, this didn't happen on an actual Pawn Stars episode, but the moment when the late underground rapper Sean Price confidently walks into the pawn shop looking to sell a potato is too good not to include. Asking an outrageous $100,000 for the starchy food staple, the rapper tells Chumlee an incredible story. Supposedly, the decades-old potato was thrown at Martin Luther King Jr. during the March on Washington in 1963. It was passed down to Price when his uncle died, so it has sentimental value. The tater also has some battle wounds from the violent toss, 2 large puncture holes, and a giant gash that resembles a smiley face. Chum clearly doesn't know what to make of the whole story, but he can't take it seriously without any authentication paperwork to back it up. Still, Chum makes an offer. He says he's willing to pay the value of the potatoes worth in french fries, $2. Price can't believe his ears and says Chum doesn't understand the historic value of the item. But after a few sighs and a little introspection, the offer is accepted.
I wanted more than what I got, but what I got I'm cool with.
Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite shows are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.